On the 14th of June 1919, John Alcock and Arthur Whitton Brown departed Newfoundland with the sole aspiration of crossing the Atlantic. After 16 hours and 27 minutes of some of the roughest possible flying, their Vickers Vimy aircraft was gently guided down into what turned out to be a bog, though more importantly, a bog in Ireland. They had just written their names into the history books, and courtesy of a £10,000 prize offered by the Daily Mail for the first transatlantic crossing, made themselves considerably richer. Fast forward to 1969, 50 years on from their original feat, and the skies above the Atlantic would once again become a place for aviation pioneering and record-breaking, in celebration of the heroic achievement 50 years earlier. Organised by the Daily Mail newspaper, the race was held between the 4th and the 11th of May 1969. Although named an air race, it was actually a race of individuals between the Post Office Tower in London and the Empire State Building in New York, specifically the 33rd floor viewing gallery of the Post Office Tower and the 86th floor of the Empire State. Each of the individuals, or runners, had to use some form of air transport, in keeping with the spirit of the original venture. You'll have already noticed the tricky catch. With runners compelled to start and end deep within each of the cities, rather than just a baseline of departing and or reaching the relevant soil. For most civilian competitors, this would mean a laboured journey through both London and New York's busy streets at either end, with a commercial flight sandwiched between. This did little to wane interest, with the papers full of coverage in the build-up to the event, and excitement around a number of high-profile players in the upcoming race. Of course, for the fastest times, expectations surrounded the various military factions vying for victory, with both the RAF and Royal Navy planning attempts, both utilising different unique capabilities of their platforms. We'll start off with a look at the RAF's attempt, which would revolve around the unique abilities of the Hawker Siddeley Harrier. This was a pretty bold decision, as the Harrier was still in testing at Boscombe Down at the time, with initial entry into service only expected around the time of the race. One of the complications this would present was that at the time only 3 individuals were actually qualified on the Harrier, with Mike Adams expected to be in the race seat. Naturally, he would be forced to miss the race after being injured in the nose wheel collapse of a Harrier in testing, necessitating his replacement with squadron leader Tom Lecky Thompson. As we've already discussed, one of the biggest challenges of the race would be navigating the city streets between the destinations and the major airports. The crux of the RAF's plan was to utilise the Harrier's vertical capabilities to reduce the overall distance to the destination by taking off and landing from points within the cities themselves. This would result in one of the most spectacular pieces of footage that would be caught to the Harrier, with Lecky Thompson departing from the old coal yards alongside St Pancras Station, temporarily renamed RAF St Pancras, following a hop on a motorcycle from the Post Office Tower. After departing London, the Harrier cruised across the Atlantic at around 683 miles per hour, refuelling 10 times in flight using 13 RAF Victors before approaching New York. I've heard stories that the Harrier's landing in New York took place at the famous helipad off FDR Drive in the south of Manhattan, or even at the Empire State Building itself, though in reality, Lecky Thompson's aircraft was brought down with much fanfare and attention at a temporarily constructed helipad at the ongoing construction site of the new UN headquarters in Midtown, the helipad having been built by the US Marine Corps, who would go on to have a great association with the Harrier. Following the landing, Lecky Thompson raced across town on a motorcycle, reaching the 86th floor in a total time of 6 hours and 11 minutes, the fastest westbound leg of the race. I've always been particularly fond of this story, as the Harrier used is now displayed at Brooklands Museum, a short way from me alongside a replica of the Vickers Vimy used in the original success all those years ago. From what I've heard, it was a hell of a restoration job, and the legacy of all that coal dust from the dramatic takeoff from St Pancras was a lasting one. The RAF would also perform an eastbound leg of the trip, also using Harriers. Lecky Thompson had actually taken part in the positioning flight in the days before his westbound attempt to both leave an aircraft at Floyd Bennett Field and practice for his timed run, taking the opportunity to fly past and hover alongside the arriving Queen Elizabeth II ocean liner as it arrived into the Narrows of New York Harbor. Of course, all of this without RAF approval. The timed eastbound leg would be undertaken by Squadron Leader Graham Williams, naturally departing the Empire State Building in a red E-Type Jaguar for his Harrier. Conditions were deteriorating fast, with airports like Kennedy closed from rain and fog. Williams needed to press on, however, as time was running out in the mail's deadline. As he prepared his Harrier for takeoff, concerned FAA officials attempted to step in and prevent his departure. This forced an intervention from Bill Bedford, a former test pilot and the sales director for Hawker Siddeley, who kept officials engaged for long enough for Williams to disappear into the horizon. Williams would ultimately finish with a total time of 5 hours and 50 minutes on the eastbound leg, similarly using a motorcycle for his final transport to the post office tower. This time would actually be eclipsed by another RAF entry, with a Victor bomber departing from Floyd Bennett Field to then RAF Wisley, which is now sadly a housing estate, carrying additional fuel in the internal bomb bay. The V-bomber would see its passenger complete the full trip in 5 hours and 49 minutes, just 29 seconds faster than Graham Williams' eastbound Harrier trip. Whilst this would win the class of fastest subsonic travel between New York and London, for the overall winner we have to look to the Royal Navy. The Royal Navy would prioritise eastbound attempts for its competing runs, utilising both Atlantic tailwinds and its supersonic Phantom fighters. The airfield from which they would start was Floyd Bennett Field, situated to the south of New York JFK, which lay directly on the intended flight path of the Phantoms. Sportingly, the Americans made all the arrangements and ensured air traffic movements at JFK would be suspended for 2 minutes at 8:15 on 3 mornings, though the Nova Scotia authorities prohibited overflight at supersonic speed over their territory, which would hinder the overall time. This time, the iconic Manhattan heliport would feature, with the crews helicoptered from the downtown site out to the Phantom's departure point. On the 11th of May, 1969, a Royal Navy Phantom of 892 Naval Air Squadron set a new world speed record between New York and London in 4 hours and 46 minutes, traversing the Atlantic with the support of both RAF Victor tankers and the frigate HMS Nubian stationed in the Atlantic to provide supporting radar coverage. Following landing at RAF Wisley, which again is now a housing estate that I'm not at all bitter about, Lieutenant Commander Peter Goddard would be whisked from the station to central London by Wessex helicopter, special dispensation needing to be given as a twin-engine helicopter was required by the CAA. Eventually it was reasoned that the Wessex technically had 2 engines driving 1 rotor. Goddard would ultimately win the day, racing from his observation seat in the Phantom and finding the post office tower's 33rd floor in a time of 5 hours and 11 minutes, the fastest of all classes. As we've already discussed, the event brought with it considerable public interest, generating headlines on both sides of the Atlantic. With that came a number of notable entries. Chief amongst these I'd consider Anne Alcock, at the time an 18-year-old art student from Westcott in Surrey, and niece of the pioneering transatlantic aviator Lieutenant John Alcock. Anne would symbolically be the first competitor to depart London, designated as a licensed mail carrier for the event, in order to carry a letter across the Atlantic, just like Alcock and Brown carried mail on their flight in 1919. Unfortunately, her attempt ended in heartache at Kennedy Airport, just 30 minutes from the finish line, which meant she missed her connecting helicopter, losing both her passport and immigration forms. Another notable entrant was Sir Stirling Moss of racing fame, using a chartered VC-10 for the westbound leg flying between Gatwick and JFK, though finishing outside of any competitive time. The VC-10 would prove a popular fixture of civil entries, as it was now well established on the transatlantic route. This was highlighted by an independent entry from the RAF, with no MOD backing. RAF's No. 10 Squadron had a fair bit of experience of the route and felt confident enough to make an attempt of their own volition, registering a training flight that would depart Wisley for JFK Airport and utilise the same helicopter support at either end as the official attempts by both the RAF and Navy. Heather Robinson, the nominated runner for this effort, was then whisked from the Manhattan heliport to the Empire State Building in a Stars and Stripes painted car. For a reverse effort, where any really competitive time could be achieved, The car was misplaced, and a motorcycle used instead. Despite an initial eastbound time of 6 hours and 29 minutes, there would be no official prize for this independent team, with fellow competitor and notable TV broadcaster Clement Freud pointing out that the change of transport between the car and motorcycle for a returning leg was against the rules and the time quashed. The competition really had attracted bucket loads of entrants, with civilian runners not just restricted to commercial travel. Some of the most memorable journeys clocked times of over 20 hours, using all manner of assortments of light aircraft. In total, 21 different prizes were awarded across the categories at a dinner held at the Royal Garden Hotel in Kensington on the 14th of May 1969, with the winners presented to Prince Philip at the reception beforehand. Ultimately, squadron leader Tom Lecky Thompson best captured the spirit of the competition and its tribute to the pioneering achievements of Alcock and Brown, stating later in life, "For me, the proudest aspect of the Daily Mail air race is the fact that it was a marvellous team effort. From the ground crew to the designers, air traffic control and tanker pilots, everyone made a sterling effort. It wasn't just about one man and his aircraft by any means."